So first rule, don't use a user as sysdba. SysDBA is not the right user to export data. You see it also here on the slide, which is taken from a documentation. Use the system user or an equivalent with the exp-full database role or imp-full database roles or the equivalent data pump roles, which are exactly the same as the old roles, but not SysDBA. Then always have a dump file. It sounds very odd, but really a lot of issues getting on our tables with data pump are simply based on the fact that somebody wrote a long piece of code in a command line with a lot of backslashes to break it into several lines. This is not the right way. Have a par file, makes your life easier. If something goes wrong, makes our life easier. You save at the end of the day a lot of time. And this applies to export and import, of course. Then also let data pump during the export split into multiple files, especially if you intend to upload to the object storage. That is a good best practice. And you saw that maybe also in the move to ADB demo, that without our intervention, it split up the export already in several files and uploaded them in parallel into the object storage, which for our small data set didn't matter very much. But for a larger data set, that makes a big difference, as we can really upload in parallel. And there you use the %u in the dump file name, and this splits into multiple files based on the parallel degree. For more than 99 files, if you need that, use the %l parameter, as you see on the bottom of the slide. And also define a file size. At the moment, for the move to ADB, the max file size is 5 GB. That is very important here to specify. Then always exclude statistics during export. Here, this is double important. First of all, it speeds up the import, but second, allow the autonomous instance to do that for you afterwards the right way. That is much better. Then also very, very helpful during export, include telemetry, which means enable all options to monitor what's happening, create a proper log file. We showed you that on the other session about migration strategies and techniques as well, because log time all gives us precise timestamps, and matrix yes gives you information about which object has been imported what way and which worker has done that work. So this is really important. If anything goes wrong, or if you search for potential to optimize things, proper log files don't cost anything and give you way more advice. Make consistent exports. That is a rule. Flashback time systimestamp is the best thing. You could also say consistent, yes, but use the newer one, makes it better. And this applies to export, of course, only. The import per se takes what you exported. Then always use parallel if you have Enterprise Edition. With Standard Edition, unfortunately, you can't use parallel. That is not part. Parallel data pump export does not work with Standard Edition, but with Enterprise Edition it does. And by default, during the export, we would say on premises twice the number of CPU cores. If you export from OCI, take the number of OCPUs. That is a good estimate. It doesn't guarantee you that is always the best. If you are really hunting for the final minutes, you may experiment a little bit. I've seen cases where we had to go with a lower parallel degree to get better results, or with a higher, overloading the CPUs. It depends a little bit. There's no clear rule, but this is a good estimate to start with and may apply to most cases the best. Then also remove column encryption. So it doesn't matter if you have column encryption or not, but this removes it. In the ADW or ATP, there is no column encryption, and this is not beneficial either. Then consider using compression. If you have an advanced compression license, and especially for large uploads to the cloud, it's key if your files are small. So if you use we would start with the compression algorithm medium. So you say compression all and then compression algorithm medium as in the slide. And this is the best balance between load on CPU, but also compress factor on the dump files. If you are not struggling with the time for exporting, then you can also use compression high. This will put a lot of pressure on your CPUs for sure, but then you get really the smallest possible dump files. Low is an option we have seen in our internal tests. You don't get proper results. It's very big dump files and it doesn't really run so much faster. Basic sometimes is better than low. Basic is the old algorithm until we introduced the compression algorithm. You could only say compression yes, all data or metadata, and this used the old algorithm, which is similar to low, a bit better than low, but the best way to start with is really medium, or if you have a bit more time but search for a very small dump file, then high. Remember, just you need an advanced compression license on source when you export. And this will also, as soon as you trigger data pump this way, it will pump up the counter in DBA feature usage statistics for the use of compression option. A few tweaks, what could help? Views as tables allows you to export data like a subset of a table because you created a view on it, but this subset of a table which you masked with a U will be exported as if it would be a table. And during import you can remap the table name and change it to something more appropriate, because the view typically has a different name, like here V1, and table was T1, the original table. Now when we would create a table after the import, it would have the name V1. Also very helpful, especially with the object storage URIs, you can use wildcards. So here the dump file, you see that my like 50 object files, 50 dump files, they have like consecutive numbers, and I just use the wildcard, so the percentage U will access 01, 02 and so on up to 99, or L will do the thing for numbers larger than 99. Then when you import, you have to transform IoTs into tables. So this is done with this special parameter, which is even hard to read. So transform equals DWCS underscore CVT underscore IOTS. Yes, and this will transform IoTs because IoTs don't work in Autonomous. Then also enforce proper naming standards for your constraints for primary keys and foreign key indexes. And there's this helpful parameter doing this, the constraint use default index, yes, and this will enforce proper naming. Also, again, only import here. Then remove segment customization. And this is done with segment attributes no. So this removes any sort of segment customization because Autonomous does it for you. So trust a little bit, and the Autonomous instance during import will do this the right way for you. Also remap any table spaces to data. So use remap table space equals wildcard every table space into data. This is the way how to import into Autonomous. And then follow the best practices. And here this is a little bit longer and I won't read that to you. But I told you at the very beginning here that there are some restrictions. Things we don't support in ADW. And therefore you just take this from the documentation. Say, okay, this is, so under ADW best practice, when you download a PDF, there's a link to the documentation. And you just take this from the documentation. And please take it on right before you do it. Because as I explained beforehand, this could be the state of today when we do the seminar, but 2 weeks later, maybe we support now clusters. Could be, I don't know, whatever. So take this from the documentation right as it is. And ATP has even less restrictions here. So for ATP, you only exclude cluster and database link, and that's it. Same here, link to the documentation.